everyone. Welcome to the CBI webinar about fraud and adulteration in the spices and herb sector. And it's a pleasure to welcome you today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I see that we have attendees from so many different countries, and we're going to ask you to come online in just a couple of seconds, as in respond to a poll so that we get a good impression of where you are from. As you're aware, fraud and adulteration is actually a very challenging issue when it comes to the spices and herb trade in Europe. And it's something that European industry authorities are extremely keen on stopping. And one of the ways that they do try to stop the fraud and adulteration is by putting pressure on market players and encouraging them to take action to make sure that it's limited as much as possible. And I'm just checking if you can all see my screen. I believe you can. So my name is Tonia Dabwa, and I am your moderator today for this webinar. And we will be sharing some information with you about the fraud and adulteration in the European spices and herb sector. But we're going to spend most of our time hearing from industry experts, particularly how they have been able to avoid this, how they've been able to stop this, and what steps they're taking, what best practices they're using to counter fraud and adulteration in spices and herbs. We'll soon start the session, but let's do a couple of introductions. So as I said, my name is Tonia Dabwa, and I'm your moderator today. I am of Dutch and Liberian origin, and I have a consulting company that works with businesses in Europe and Africa, as well as a couple of businesses in South Asia and the US, focusing particularly on helping them increase sales, boost profitability, and grow their business faster. Today, however, my role is to make sure that as your moderator, everything goes smoothly, that we have hopefully very limited technical glitches in this webinar, and to make sure that we share the information that you need, and that I hope today's webinar is going to be able to answer the questions that you have. I'm going to walk you through a couple of housekeeping rules so that you know what to pay attention to. The main thing that you need to know, and I'm saying, yes, my screen is working. The main thing that you need to know for today's webinar is that we cannot hear you and we cannot see you. So first things first, if you run into any technical issues, as in you have audio problems, for example, or your screen is glitching, the easiest solution is just to log out of the webinar and log back in using the link that was provided to you in the email. If you keep having audio problems, the next solution that you can do is to use your phone and call into the webinar. And you're not making an international call, it's going to be local tariff only. So that is a second option that you can try if you keep having audio problems or visual problems with the webinar. And in case that doesn't work, please know that we are recording this webinar. So if you have to leave early, or if you do keep running into those problems, we're going to send you a link so that you can review the webinar at your leisure. And if you missed anything, you can review it as well. So we have a questions tab in GoToWebinar that you can use to ask questions. A reminder, we cannot see you, we cannot hear you. So the only way that we have of interacting with you is by seeing your questions. And please feel free to ask whatever questions that you have. Starting now, the questions tab is live and our backend is available to start looking at your questions, and technical questions will be answered as quickly as possible. And substantive questions that you have about the webinar, about topics that we're discussing, we will answer them during the Q&A session that we have at the end of the webinar. We have a quick poll, as I said, to test the interactivity of GoToWebinar, make sure that everything is working correctly at your end. And I think we are about ready to move into that poll. So let's see if this works well. I am now launching the poll, and I'm asking you to be so kind as to respond. I'll leave it up for just about a minute. Okay, lots of Europe. I saw a list of attendees today, and I saw a lot of people from Africa, from Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya. I also saw people from Norway, so that'd be Europe, Vietnam, Thailand, I believe I saw, Indonesia, India, obviously. So we do have a lot of people coming in, and about 75% of you have voted. So I'm just going to leave it open for a few more seconds. Okay, closing it down in 5 seconds. 1, thank you for voting. And I am just going to quickly share the results. So as you can see, most of our attendees today are actually based in Europe. Welcome, good morning to you all. And we have an equal number of attendees, at least from those that voted, from Africa and from Asia. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you. Thank you for voting. And we are now going to move into our presentations. But before we do, I would like to invite Thomas Funk to join me on the screen. Thomas is a program manager at CBI. CBI, as you know, is the organization that is hosting today's webinar. Welcome, Thomas. Would you perhaps like to welcome our audience?
Yes, thank you, Tonya. Yes, welcome to everyone for visiting and joining this webinar. I'm Thomas Funk. I'm from CBI. I work at the market intelligence team. So we're responsible with the team for all the studies on our website, the market information. And so CBI is the Center for the Promotion of Import from Developing Countries. And our mission is to support the transition towards inclusive and sustainable economies. And we promote and create decent jobs. That's our main goal. And we pay special attention to women and youth. And we also stimulate sustainable production and trade. And with that work, we contribute directly to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, number 8, 5, 12, and 17. At CBI, we work in a selection of countries. So nowadays, we mainly work in African countries and some Asian countries. So together, it's 24, 25 countries we can start new projects in. However, our market intelligence is for all countries free available. And we are active in 13 sectors at the moment. You can see them here. And today, of course, is about the spices and herbs sector. Yes, next, please. CBI has 2 main pillars. It's the CBI projects and it's the CBI market information. So here in our CBI projects, we identify economic opportunities for local and medium-sized enterprises on international markets. So in our project, we help small, medium enterprises and business support organizations to enter these markets. So we do that with different activities, like visiting trade fairs with them, doing all kinds of trainings. So they're always if you're part of a CBI project, you're in a 4-year expert coaching program. And so here on the right, back,
sorry.
please. So on the right, you see some of our projects that are currently active in different kind of sectors. So we have here, I have one highlighted, this is the spices sector, but we have projects in all kinds of sectors. So you can visit our website to look for more projects that we're active in now. Yes, next, please, Tony. In our project, we work with all kinds of organizations like NGOs, knowledge institutions, universities, importers, of course, producers, of course, and SME exporters. Yes, next. And
this is
I think you skipped one, Tonya.
I think I might have put that at the very end, Thomas.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that. I thought it had to be at the end, but you're coming back to us with a few words about where exactly to find the market information.
Yes.
So I'll say thank you for this initial introduction. Apologies for skipping one of your slides.
Pillar we come back to later, yes.
And
okay.
We'll focus on that in just a little over an hour at the end of the webinar. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start introducing our speakers and our presenters. And first up in our lineup, and also first up to present in just a bit, is Gustavo. Gustavo, good morning. Thank
morning,
you for
everyone.
joining us today.
Thank you.
As you can see on the slide, Gustavo is an expert in natural ingredients and food products, including herbs and spices, and he's actually the lead researcher at CBI for the spices and herbs studies. But he doesn't only work for CBI. You can see the list of organizations, other organizations that he works for. And Gustavo, I told you I was going to do this to our audience. Gustavo is open to connecting. You see his LinkedIn contact information, so please do feel free to reach out to him with an invitation. Gustavo, maybe a couple of words?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for the interest in the subject. The title of the session is Fraud and Adulteration of Spices, but obviously we're talking about good practices here. So we're going to provide some solutions and some of the projects implemented by our panelists.
Thank you, Gustavo. And next up is Evert-Jan Verschuren. Evert-Jan, may I ask you to switch on your camera too? There you are. Good evening to you, because you are based in Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, Evert-Jan, Program Manager for Verstegen Spices, private sector representative, joining us today to be talking about the best practices at Verstegen. Area of expertise, developing sustainable supply chains, and a lot of experience in the international spice industry. Evert-Jan, what else do we need to know?
Yeah, almost living here for 10 years in Asia, and enjoying developing our supply chains here in different countries.
Perfect, and we look forward to hearing some of your experiences at Verstegen and some of the best practices that you've been able to introduce. Thank you for being a part here of the webinar today. May I ask Alyssa to join us? There you are. Good morning to you, Alyssa. Alyssa is the founder and CEO of Adem Food. Adem Food based in Ukraine, if I am correct, Alyssa.
Yes, that's correct. And Norway as well.
And Norway as well. We all know that the situation isn't easy in Ukraine today, so highly appreciate you making the time to join us, and we look forward to hearing about your best practices as well. And ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, Alyssa is responsible for setting up sustainable partnerships with farmers and producers to achieve traceability, transparency, and quality. And in addition to that, she's a busy woman, but in addition to that, she also makes time to help small and medium-sized companies, producers enter international markets and expand their business. Alyssa, what else can you tell us?
Well, we were working directly with the farmers, and I really enjoyed that side. So I will be really glad to share my experience and some advices with everyone how to set up this sustainable and trust and reliable relationship with all the members of our business operations.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the key aspects of building a partnership. So we definitely look forward to hearing more from you about that in just a few minutes. Thank you for being here today. And our final speaker for today is Iona Mulder. Iona, welcome. You're the founder of, there you are. You are the founder of The Good Spice, and you have a background in history and human rights. And what I found really interesting is that while you were setting up your business, you worked as a chef, which leads me to think that you were able to test out the spices and test out the flavors, because you're once again trying to make the farmer, nature, and flavors central to the spice production. It sounds like you were testing out the spices at the same time as that you were setting up your business, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I was really interested in like the Middle Eastern kitchen and how the restaurants were using it, and if there would be a good market in the end for my company. So a lot of things learned there.
Okay.
And we're not working with restaurants at the moment. So.
Okay. Do you still have your own? Do you still have a restaurant, or do you still work as a chef?
No, I don't. I know it's full-time.
Full-time on The Good Spice. Yeah. Okay, and we are definitely very interested to hear about your experiences, so just later on in the webinar. Thank you for being here as well. And we are now going to move into the various presentations, and particularly we're going to kick off with a presentation by Gustavo. And Gustavo, there you are on the screen. Take it away.
there I am again. Thanks, Tonya, for the moderation today. And of course, thanks to all our panelists that are here to share their experiences, and also to the CBI team, Yuri, Thomas, for your support also on making this happen. Well, also, as I introduced in the very beginning of the session, we are here to talk about not only about the problem, but also about the solutions. But I want to kick off with actually why we are doing this, why we actually chose to have this discussion in this platform. When I was writing the studies this year, I just realized that this was a subject, fraud, adulteration, and in general, food safety and sustainability. There were subjects that were emerging all the time when you're reading about spices, when you're talking about spices and researching. So as being a cross-cutting issue, I thought it was important to discuss some of the solutions. And as our audience is SMEs in emerging economies, I thought it was important to give them the voice as well and give them some good practices. I would like to start first with some facts and figures about the European market for spices and herbs, just contextualize what we are talking about here and why the subject is so important for the European market. Europe accounts for around 25% of the total imports of herbs and spices in the world. As you can see, it's not the biggest market, but it is a market that actually pays good prices for spices, and these prices are usually higher than in most other regions that are importing spices. And Europe does not produce a lot of the spices, and actually most of these spices are coming from outside of Europe. So these are global value chains. These are long and complex value chains also to get the spices to actually arrive in Europe in terms of its imports. And apart from the functionality, the growth in exotic flavors, natural alternatives, spices being used for salt, sugar replacers, we also have, of course, a lot of light on food safety and sustainability, which are two subjects that are actually quite cutting quite across the subject of fraud and adulteration here. Yeah, so when you speak about European market, actually for European authorities, it is very high priorities for many years now. And through the food law and through other mechanisms of legislation, the protection of consumers from misleading and unsafe products. So that's why fraud and adulteration is so much discussed and why it's so relevant also in terms of the institutional structure of the European market. Spices and herbs is actually quite a vulnerable sector for fraud and adulteration. On the one side, it's because, of course, a lot of these spices and herbs are high value, so there are a lot of opportunities in the supply chain for economic gain, and a lot of the people are mismanaging the supply chain in order to make this economic gain in the wrong way. But also there have been some previous assessments on the nature of the supply chain, and it has been recognized as a sector that is subject to fraud and adulteration. And as I said before, these are long, fragmented, and very complex supply chains. As you know, a lot of the spices are produced by smallholders, and these are going through a lot of intermediaries in between, and then they get into the market. So it's just very complex, and there are a lot of opportunities, as I mentioned, for fraud and adulteration, such as color enhancement with non-authorized dyes, substitution of a lot of the spices and herbs with other botanical materials or fillers, and several other practices that we can see on the market, that are happening on the market. And that includes also false information about practices, false information about the botanical identity of the products, and also false claims about sustainability, for example. We'll hear more about this in the presentation of Evertian also, but this is basically how we can define fraud and adulteration. It's not only the physical fraud and adulteration, but also false claims and false information that you communicate forward in the supply chain. And actually, in the end of 2021, the EU has published the result of a sector-wide effort, a survey on spice and herb authenticity and purity, and more than 10,000 samples have been analyzed against the ISO standards of each individual spice that you can see here on the screen. And it was concluded that the risk of adulteration is still fairly high in the spice and herb sector, but this varies a lot per product. So as you can see here, This is the percentage of the samples that were at risk of adulteration for the individual spices. Oregano at quite high, 48% at risk of adulteration. This is mostly because of the mixture with olive tree leaves, pepper at 17%, and as you can see here in the list, paprika chili at 6%. So this is the range of the spices that were at risk. These were selected due to the history of the spices, the market volumes, etc. These results do not really show exactly specific patterns from specific supplying countries or importing countries, but it shows in general the profile of specific spices in terms of fraud and adulteration, risk for fraud and adulteration. And looking at the big picture, why is this so relevant that we are discussing the subject? If we look at the impact, the potential impact of fraud and adulteration, not only on the spice market, but also in general in society, we can see that a lot of things are touched upon here. Exposure of consumers to harmful substances, toxic substances that might be mixed with existing spices and herbs, deprivation of consumer choice. So this is an important pillar of food legislation, is that consumers should be able to choose what they put in their bodies, basically. Enhancement of corruption and illegal profits coming from malpractices, destabilization of food security and access to food, and obviously disruption of supply chains and of markets. And as you can see here, I put some of the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and how these are so relevant to when you look at fraud and adulteration in spices also. And just bringing specific attention to this moment in European legislation and also European institutions is that sustainability and sustainable value chains are becoming part of legislation. So companies that are active in Europe are under a lot of pressure to comply. So they are needing more information from suppliers, more documentation, they are asking more questions, and there is implementation of more standards. And this is very relevant to discuss fraud and adulteration within, because it has a huge impact also in how we look at sustainable supply chains. And I just want to bring attention to one of the, let's say, one of the devices that are already one of the deliverables of the EU Green Deal through the Farm to Fork strategy, which is the EU Code of Conduct on responsible food business and marketing practices. And fraud and adulteration is super relevant here because the main goal of this code of conduct is to increase the availability and affordability of healthy and sustainable food options that help reduce the environmental footprint. This is a real commitment that was signed by 65 companies and associations in Europe in 2021, and they have to report on a yearly basis. So we can see that these commitments are slowly materializing, and they will have consequences for suppliers also in emerging economies that are working with spices. And what are some of the instruments and good practice that we are going to see through the presentations of our panelists? Well, first of all, the identification of the blind spots in the supply chain. So what are the things that are happening that we cannot identify right now, but that we need to make clear in order to address them? Obviously, we're going to hear about the closer contact between consumer and producing countries, which is related to shorter and more traceable supply chains, of course. In turn, as Alessia already introduced, as Iona and Everchen also talked about, long-lasting relations between buyers and suppliers and trust-based relationships, training and other technical assistance to farmers and other supply chain operators. Obviously, the use of technology is playing a big role here, use of blockchain and other testing methods through the supply chain in order to safeguard authenticity of spices. And of course, evidence reporting and communication, claims that are evidenced by correct data. So this is important here. And one interesting point that I wanted to maybe bring to discussion is whether certifications are also playing a role in diminishing malpractices in terms of fraud and adulteration spices. We can hear from our panelists. This is it for my general introduction of the subject, and we're going to hear more practical information from our panelists and some good practices from them as well.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. And as you said already, we're very much interested in the best practices that we're going to hear today, which is why we're really putting that focus on the private sector companies that we have invited to be a part of this webinar. And first up, as I said, is Evert-Jan Verstegen. So Evert-Jan, may I ask you to join us on the screen? And you are going to be sharing with us a case study of Verstegen spices. And I think we're really interested to hear how are European buyers tackling this issue, and yeah, what do these controls mean for exporters, and what tips and suggestions do you have for other exporters in terms of how they can tackle this issue? So we look forward to hearing from
you. Thank you, Tonya and Gustavo. Well, I'm Evert-Jan Verstegen, and I will explain today how we deal with fraud and adulteration within Verstegen spices and sauces. Next, please. To briefly start off with is a brief introduction of Verstegen. We are a family-owned company since 1886. We serve the markets, industry, food service, and retail with our Verstegen brand, but also with the private label brand. We have a strong focus on quality and food safety. And one of the quality features for us is one quality for all food applications. And also the origin is part of our quality. This means, for example, for us, the best pepper comes from Indonesia, and that defines also the quality of Verstegen. Furthermore, we are into sustainable and responsible sourcing, and that has become a major part of our brand. And currently we're in the middle of a sustainable transition and are designing how our supply chains will look like in the year 2035. Next, please. We are concerned about three different types of fruit and adulteration. First, of course, quality and food safety, and then origin. Then you need to think about the country, the region, and also the GI, the geographical indication. And then last, the sustainable claims in our supply chains made. Next, please. The first is then on quality and food safety. Our policy is to buying our herbs and spices as much as possible in whole. Why? Because the risk for whole products, for adulteration in whole products is low, and in ground products the risk is high. You need to think about cheap fillers like starch and spent material in the ground product. And also another risk is, like Gustavo also saying, the colorants used in products like turmeric, like leaf grommet. That is then a nice bridge to also our second intervention, the chemical analysis. We are doing a broad range of analysis on our incoming materials and samples. And for example, the percentage of volatile oil in our sample is an indicator if the ground product has been diluted or not. And we test a broad range on chemical colorants like illegal dyes on all the samples received by Verstegen to prevent the risk for illegal dyes. Another intervention is our sensory panel. Here we compare the samples received with our reference sample, and we have a whole set of characteristics which we are comparing the samples with. And this helps us in analyzing if the product is different from our reference. And to overcome the subjective part of the sensory panel, we also investing in an electronic nose. And here we are building a database to compare samples with, and it will support our analysis in differences in samples, which I will explain in the following slides as well. Next, please. Here an example of oregano. You saw in the presentation of Gustavo that is a high risk for adulteration. Here we are sourcing the product in a fine cut of 3 to 5 mm. And we look here at the leaves under the microscope. On the left side, you see all the possible adulteration for oregano. That is sumac leaf, myrtle leaves, and strawberry leaves. And on the right side, you see the oregano leaves. So it's hard to tell the difference even under the microscope. And one of the characteristics for us to look at for oregano is, for example, the old spots on the leaves. That for us defines that we are dealing with real oregano or not. And this helps us analyzing the samples. Next, please. But that is, of course, not the only analysis we do. We also use our electronic nose. Here is one of the results also for oregano. You see here the blue line and the black line. The blue line was the alternative sample, and the black line is our reference for oregano. And you see, for example, between the retention time between 50 and 70, a lot of blue peaks, which are not so strong in the black line, in the reference sample for oregano. And between the 70 and 90 seconds, you see a high peak in the black line, which is not occurring in the blue line. This is for us an indication that the sample tested with the electronic nose is not the same as our reference sample as oregano, and we might be facing an adulterated product or non-oregano product. And we do the similar test on the sensory. On the right side, you see the results of the sensory test. The pink line is our reference, for oregano, and the blue line is then the alternative sample. And you see here also the differences in the taste profile. This is more or less how we assess the quality and food safety of our products. Then I would like to go on to the next slide. Then we have the fraud and adulteration on origin. This is a bit harder to detect. As I mentioned in my introduction, origin and region is one of our important part of our quality. And as example, Verstegen, we only source from country cardamom from Guatemala, and more specific, we focus on the region for black pepper, for example, from Lampung in Indonesia, and then also in Indonesia, white pepper with a GI certified certification or geographical indication certification from Bangka for the white pepper for Indonesia. What will then be the risk for us? Well, that the goods are being replaced with other origins. For example, Indonesian pepper can be replaced with Vietnamese or Brazilian pepper, and especially if other origins are more competitive, and that's the risk higher for the fraud. How are we controlling this? Well, we are trying to avoid as much as possible traders. We are mapping our supply chains. We have built a trace platform where we are collecting all the data from all the partners or chains in the supply chain for all our spices and herbs. And during our vendor assurance audits, supplier audits, we are focusing on traceability. We basically assessing how well our suppliers are capable of collecting data from their supply chains and how transparent they are on this with this data. Next, please. And the last is our the sustainability or sustainable claims in our supply chains. We have organic products. Well, organic is a high risk for chemicals, contamination with chemicals. Also, sustainable claims for natural farming or responsible production or regenerative agriculture. Another claim can be a certification like FSA or Rainforest Alliance. And we also focusing on risk management, where is the high risk for deforestation and child labor, for example. Again, what are the risks here? Well, that conventional product organic product has been replaced with conventional product, which has been tested negative on chemicals, but has not been produced under organic management. And also another risk is that additional product has been added to the organic or certified product to collect the premiums for the claims like natural farming or responsible production, and also certified production against Rainforest Alliance of FSA can be replaced by ordinary conventional product. That's are the risks. Here we have more or less the similar control mechanisms. We are mapping our supply chains with our trace platform and also traceability assessments during our vendor assurance audits, understanding how well our partners are capable of sharing the data. We Recently, or 4 years back, we started also piloting with a blockchain platform. Next slide, please. We're using the Trace blockchain platform to understand better what the risks are in our supply chains. You see an overview simplified of the supply chains we are normally looking at. We divide it into 3, and of course the part of the farm is most important. Here we have been developing a Trace app, and with the app we are collecting the data at farm level. How does it work? We give all the farmers an NFC card, as you can see, and on this card are the demographics of this farmer. And then when on the moment between the transaction between the collector and the farmer, they are using that card to tap on the phone and sharing the data of the farmer, but also verifying the transaction data. The farmer says with the card that he agrees with the transaction made. With this data set, we are able to analyze our supply chains, income, and also location and farm activities, etc. This will help us understanding the supply chain much better, and also working together with our partners in the supply chain on these difficult topics like living income and what type of chemicals are used in on farm levels. Next, please. I also mentioned the risk assessment and origin, which for us is a risk mainly for deforestation and also for child labor. I have here the example of deforestation. Here's the world map, and here we indicate with the color where we are sourcing from. And I made a top 3 of high risk for deforestation. Number 3 is Madagascar, number 2 is Guatemala, and number 1 is Indonesia. Next slide, please. And if you zoom into Indonesia, we see here what product are we sourcing from what island or what province, and also with the percentage, the risk for, or what the current deforestation rate is. So if you're sourcing products, for example, cassia from Kerinci, that there is a high risk for deforestation, then we are discussing with our suppliers what intervention we can have to prevent deforestation, and what risk do we have there in the area. But it's also the other way around. We need to understand what the risks are of sourcing from a country as big as Indonesia, where we need to look for what kind of risk, and that's why we need this information and also need our suppliers to share this information with us. This also, to prevent and also harming our reputation as a company. This is actually so far the presentation I had. Back to you, Tonya.
Thank you very much, Evert-Jan. And Gustavo, I believe we have a question that has come in for Evert-Jan, and looking a couple of questions that we have and looking at the time, may I ask you to just ask one question and perhaps we answer the remaining questions during the Q&A panel?
Yeah, so I'll ask one question, but maybe just as a note here to Evert-Jan's presentation, I'm just like kind of impressed, or it's really nice to see how whatever practices you guys are implementing at company level really respond to the legislative developments of European Green Deal and the Due Diligence Act. This is exactly how you can see the manifestation of the real practices at company level. So that's an interesting thing, that the risk assessment is also linked with the tool that is proportionate to the risk. So you identify the risk and then implement the tools that are proportionate to each region and each situation that you encounter in this region. So this is really nice to see. I wanted to know from you, Evert-Jan, when you guys, as First Take, when you go into a new origin or when you work with new suppliers, what are the main things that you look at in terms of assessing the reliability of a new supplier or origin?
Yeah, first of all, the basics like the quality and the food safety should be in order, right? So that the supplier or the country is capable of supplying these. But then, we look basically in the set of sustainable issues, or what is the potential with that partner do they have the data about the supply chain? What do they know about the farmers, etc.? So that is for us an additional feature to start discussing if they are willing to share and being transparent, and do they already know, have they already mapped their farmers, which make our lives much easier if they have, instead of we need to do everything together. Yeah.
Great, thanks. I'll let the audience ask the other questions at a later point, but thanks a lot for your presentation and for such technical also information you shared with us.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Evert-Jan, and thank you, Gustavo. May I invite Alicia to join us on the screen as we move to her case study. And Alyssa, we are very interested to hear about Adam Food, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Tanya. Hello, everyone again. I'm Alicia Timoshina, and I'm a founder and business developer for Adam Food Company. So Adam Food was founded according to the principles of sustainable development by setting up the long-term relationship directly with the producers in the country of origin. I have really paid a lot of attention to do a big research and find the products that are very specific in the region and which have the best condition to grow. And then I went there and discovered everything about the product. So our main goal was to supply high quality, natural and safe food, as well as to promote conscious food consumption. Our shared values and business ethics are how we earn the trust from our customers and how we treat our suppliers and our staff. Our strategy emphasizes supplier partnership, applying a personal approach to achieve a strong positive impact on social, environmental, and economic elements to establish resilient business operations. From our perspective, all parties involved in the process should be fairly treated and should get a benefit from it. We eliminate middlemen from our supply chain to cut out the cost. So hence the farmers receive honest remuneration and our customers pay a fair price for the products that they choose. Therefore, we reduce the risk of losing the control, product inconsistency, and failing under fraud. So we put a lot of effort in building up trust and a reliable relationship with our suppliers. We meet our suppliers and producers in person. We're visiting them on the site. We pick the ones that match our criteria, have potential, and also are willing to grow and match production to our customer needs. We strongly believe that personal contact is a fair, contact and a fair approach, and constant education are the keys to successful cooperation. So we mostly deal with the small and medium scale farmers. We encourage them join up in cooperatives, and in this way it's easier to stabilize and control the quality. Farmers bring their produce together where it gets sorted and processed to maintain needed quality from the very beginning. In cooperatives, they learn how to become business people, what are their responsibilities and difficulties they might face, and the most important, we explain them the benefits and differences in profit from following and finishing the whole process in order to get a high quality product. So this way they become more competitive among the local farmers and are able to get a higher price for their products. We think that producers should have international market access to be aware of market trends and prices. It helps them to understand better the requirements of the market and customers' requirements and embrace the feedback from us. So streamlined upstream supply chain also improves the transparency, traceability, and the management of material safety and quality standards. So it also gives fewer opportunities for fraudsters to penetrate our supply chain. We map our supply chain from the field to the warehouse or to the customer table. Let me say a little bit about our sustainable practices, how we deal and cooperate with our farmers. So while doing the excuse me, while doing the agribusiness, we work close with the farmers in rural and remote settings, mostly in Africa, which are often impacted significantly by changing climate, food insecurity, and extreme poverty, which encourage me to develop a holistic vision and strategy for my business to deal according to the sustainable principles. Through my business, I realized the crucial importance of adapting sustainable practices, maintain the natural environment and social economic conditions of local communities for the long-term effect. For example, in Madagascar, my company worked closely together with farmer cooperatives to provide the knowledge and skill to improve agriculture practices, switch to modern farming techniques, and which helps to increase the yield. Implement income-generating activities for adults and prevent child labor. Specific projects include upgrading like cinnamon quails, pink pepper berries, wild pepper for an export, over $70,000 for them. Through discussion with local banks, we also discover other cooperatives like Ambanja cooperative in the north, which we've been working with processing and exporting gourmet vanilla beans to Europe. Through developing the cooperatives and farmers in Africa to export to Europe, I realized the lack of sustainable policies from the government. It's actually slowing down the economic growth and development in the region. It made me to learn more about it and how it can create a positive impact on these communities through implementing sustainable practices. So as a business person, of course, I strongly believe that economics should play a central role in meeting sustainable development challenges. However, it's a complex of ecological, environmental, social, and political disciplines. And also, these days, I believe that the future is in technologies and digitalization for all processes. So I think we should feel our direct duty and common responsibility to motivate and encourage our producers to supply good food for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. And I believe we have a question that has come that we want to put to Alyssa as well. Gustavo.
Alyssa, hi. How are you?
Thank you
for sharing your experiences. And as Tonya said, I think in the beginning, how you find time for everything. It's amazing how you're working so closely with producers. And I see that you have a real partnership with producers. You know, they're really partners in your supply chain. And as partners, you want them to succeed, right? Like that's basically your companies. Yeah.
Actually, for me, it's the most important because I realized that my suppliers and the products that I have, it's a solid background for successful business, actually.
Exactly. You need each other in order you have the commercial arm and they have the product, etc. So it's a partnership in the supply chain. And I was wondering, because you have seen suppliers probably succeed, fail in your supply chain, what would be your recommendations for suppliers in emerging economies, in producing countries, in working with companies like yours that really work directly with producer and producer organizations? What are the main advice points that you have?
Yes, so as I already said, like our customers are very curious and well educated these days. So we share all the information about the product. They want to know, they want to do a conscious choice to buy the fruit that they want to eat. So I think the producers should always strive to improve their quality and service standard. Also, they should focus on offering value-add products instead of just like offering raw material, which will be good for them actually at first. Then follow the market trends and be flexible to changes and listen what the customers want. Also, very important is to implement food safety program at the enterprises on the farms, set up the standards and obtain the certification. It will definitely help to reduce or prevent fraud opportunity. So there are a lot of companies and organizations that are supporting and willing to participate in this movement and sustainable development. So I think they should just use the knowledge and opportunity to learn how to leave a positive impact on our planet and hand over a smart way of living to our future generations.
Awesome. Thank you, Alessia, so much for sharing all these experiences, and probably you get a few more questions at the end of the session as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I think it's very interesting, Gustavo and Alessia. You've given an answer to Gustavo's question in his presentation earlier about certifications. So clearly, certifications are a very important tool when it comes to dealing with fraud and adulteration in spices and herb trade. At the same time, I imagine that certifications are a steep challenge for some small companies, very expensive, obviously, to get and to maintain. So, Gustavo, do you have any intro that you can give us about that before we move on to Iona's presentation?
Yeah, I think what we see is that in supply chains where we have these close relationships with producers, producer organizations, maybe certification becomes a question because the buying companies, they do see that producers are struggling to pay for certification, etc. So there are ways and ways of also controlling a supply chain and creating these relationships in a way that there is trust between producers and buyers, of course. Certification is one way. I think with the Good Spice, maybe we can see other ways that this trust has been created between producers and a buying company. So we can hear more with Iona's presentation, how they are dealing with ethics in the supply chain.
Exactly. And I think that is a very lovely segue to Iona's presentation. Hi, Iona. And thank you, Gustavo. And Iona, over to you.
Yes, hello, good morning, evening, afternoon to everyone. So I will tell something. I'm the founder of the Good Spice, and I will give a short introduction to what we do and why we think we should exist as a spice trade and brand. So here you can see some of our branding. So we mainly now focus on online sales with a growing number of stores where we are available. Next slide, please. So what do we do as the Good Spice? Yeah, we set up our own supply chains with farmers all over the world. And we source specialty spices, which means that it's a high quality and single origin, and what we do that in direct relationship with our farmers. To be very concrete, for most of our partnerships, I visit the origin country and region and travel around. It was a bit too fast, but travel around these areas. So here you can see our origin. So we started 2 years ago, and we set up our supply chains very carefully, and knowing everyone else also in the supply chain. So here we have we now have 5 spices and are growing coming years here. So what I want to add with the last slide is, as Edam Spice also said, very important for us is also to connect our consumers with the origin of the spices. So we tell a lot of stories. We take them on the journey when we visit these areas to set up the supply chain, so they can really see, okay, what are the problems in these areas, what effort is needed when setting, sourcing and growing spices. So you reestablish the value of this product for these consumers. So why do we think it's necessary? Next slide, please. So yeah, so why do we think that change is needed? And we started the Good Spice. So as many of you know, probably in the past, especially in the Netherlands, we had some black pages in history when it comes to the spice trade. And yeah, all over the world, small farmers were exploited and yeah, all the violence used to get a monopoly on the spice chain. However, yeah, of course, a lot of things have changed during these times, but we still see that a lot of our current supply of our current spice trade is based on this idea that the power shift is still in the importers, and farmers often don't have a say in how they produce or the prices that they're getting for their products. And we think that should change. So we want to show, we are showing with the Good Spice that you can work together with farmers and also respect nature. Yeah. So next slide, please. So yes, I added this photo, maybe for many of you. It's a familiar picture. This is one of the traders, a local trader in Sri Lanka, actually. And what we see here is, of course, a variety of different spices, open bags. And here, of course, local farmers will bring it to a local trader, and he will sell it on and on. Which is the current supply chain for many companies, and it means that, yeah, in this case, that starts here, so farmer to this one, then it goes to Colombo, and then often even goes to India, as there's a free trade there, and then it takes a few next steps and ending up in Europe after maybe 2 years. So we think that if we are very single origin and to sort of knowing where it's coming from, are able to guard the quality within the chain. So making sure that always the spices are stored the right way. We can make a lot of extra value for the farmer itself. Also, when we talked to the local spice trader in this case, and he told us a lot. He was very honest, and he said, like, I just add 10% to the price of the spices, which is actually not really good for the farmers because they get 10% less, and so my work is quite easy. So he saw also the problems within the supply chain himself for this system. So that is something that really needs to change, we think, and we would like to speed up this process. So in short, so what we are doing and what we are changing, you can see it here. So it's a lot of text, so I will give you 1 minute or two to read it a bit, and then I will say something more about it. So you can see a lot of what we're doing in good practices. I think it's important for us from our side to mention that. So what we're saying, spices are grown with respect for nature, without chemicals, and we are integrating regenerative practices. So we don't have like a set standard of how these good practices should be. We have a minimum, like no chemicals used during the production. But we really look at each individual situation which are problems that should have a high risk, and how we can solve that within the economic and social surroundings context of that farmer. So that also, coming back to the conversation that I was before my presentation, so this makes it quite difficult to work with certifications, and we also, as we really are close connecting our farmers with our consumers, we create this trust in a different way. So coming back to one important thing that a few people mentioned already, so quality, and in very important relation with flavor. For us, this very short supply chain and the connection with the farmer really helps us to have a product that's outstanding. So that really makes a difference in the kitchen to what is often on the Dutch market, and really showing people how fresh spices can taste. So that also will create a lot of benefits for the farmer itself, because the consumers are willing to pay more for this product. So the next slide, please. So why I add this slide to the PowerPoint is to get a bit back on the theme of our current webinar, is adulteration and fraud. So for us, I think there are few points to mention that indeed we think the basis to avoid this is to have a trust relationship with your farmers and your producers, and work with people that have the same interest. So your farmers and your suppliers should have the same goals and standard and philosophy and vision on how to produce and what to produce as you do, and for prices that also meet their interest, but at the same time allow you as a brand or an importer to maintain your business. So this is the basis of avoiding this, because you're creating long-term relationships that are very, if fraud is discovered, you will break, of course, these long distances. So it's in nobody's favor. So the second, of course, we also apply ISO standards and ESA standards. So we all test all our spices on a chemical settings. But last and not least, because I thought that a lot of my panel members would go a bit more in the chemical elements, but I think we can also learn, if we look at a specialty market, we can learn a lot from the coffee market, because in the spice industry, the quality market is still developing, especially in the Netherlands. It's a very new topic for consumers that there is quality difference in spices. And I think what we learned from the coffee market, what we can learn is that you can have a really complex cupping or quality system where you can determine the quality of your spices by tasting. We will do this with our own nose and our own tongue to taste all these different flavors. But what's interesting is that we can see from this tasting, you can detect adulteration and fraud, but you can also detect the flaws within the supply chain that maybe are by accident or are just bad practices that we can change. For example, in pepper, you will taste a bit musty stain when the pepper is not stored right, or other things, or they are plucked before. And I think we, in cooperation with farmers and ourselves and coffee masters within the coffee world, we are now developing a system to detect that, and then we can also give this feedback to the farmers. So together we can set up, create a perfect product. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you. Yeah, I always say just reach out to me if you want to work together. Also for the other device companies, I think because we can work together, we can make a lot of difference for everyone. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Iona, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So first, before asking the question, you mentioned the specialty market. I think one of the important points of specialty market is also the origin differentiation, right? That you're able to source maybe spices in the future. And this is already happening slowly but surely in some niche markets, that you have the differentiation per origin as well, which is super important because you can also attach origin to value of spices, and then it's a virtuous cycle in a supply chain if you have that. My question relates actually to whether, okay, let me just pose it differently. If you have plans to scale up and to make this model, you know, like larger, wider, with more origins, what are some of the control points, or what are some of the pillars that you have to keep in your company to, let's say, keep your business model as it was originally, that you don't lose the ethics of the supply chain and the very nature as to why you created your business the way it is? Is it scalable? And if so, what are the control points and the pillars you cannot lose?
Yeah. So yeah, I think this business system is scalable to start with. Of course, you have a lot of variety, so we can scale up in the range of spices that we have. And second, we are now like we were working already with one farmer, and the amount that we are at the moment, sourcing, we can still scale up that also. And then you have single farmers, but you also have, they work often in groups, so you can grow on that level. We of course will never be a bulk company, so we cannot scale up to that amount. So we are really B2C business. Another thing I think it's important to mention is, of course, I'm one company, The Good Place is one company. And I think way to scale up this system is also for different companies to be next to the Good Spice and have the same philosophy. So that's one thing. So I think it's a market that needs to change. So it will change if there are many more companies like me. So it's not only scalable within the Good Spice. And I think one thing that is important is that you always have a good partnership, where that could be with an exporter or with the farmer itself, that really shares your philosophy even before you. So you can really trust on this person to work with you, develop these elements without you being controlling of it. So I think that's essential for this business case to work, and to find these people that you really relate to on a mission and vision. Yeah.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Iona. And we are now ready to move into our Q&A session. So I would like to ask the rest of our panelists to join us as well. But Iona, as they're joining us, I have a question for you too. What I find really inspirational about your presentation is the trust relationship that you're building with your suppliers. That's amazing, frankly. What I am curious about is the following. It looks, if you're looking at the world today, it looks like we're seeing a development in two different directions that appear to be opposite to each other. At least it appears that way to me. One is a development in the direction of certification, control, checks, making sure that nothing can go wrong. And on the other hand, it appears that we see this development towards trust-based relationships, which you might say are actually the bedrock of human interaction and lasting human relationships. Do you see these developments as well as in opposite developments? And which of these do you think is going to win out in the end?
I see these two developments. I don't think they have to be contrasting to each other. So what I said, we don't work a lot with a certification. Of course, if a farmer or a partner wish to have a certification, we can support them in this process. But I think it's important for companies as us to exist, as we said, that for a lot of smallholders, the step towards certification is quite big, although they often work by default or by interest or by vision in an organic way. And I think it's very important for them to keep doing that while getting a good price, but not having these extra costs to get this certification. So for some, maybe we are a step in between for these smallholders. But I think certification is important when you look at bulk elements, and we do need that. But I think it's good that there's the vision in this, and that there's also focus on that certification is not everything. It's not the answer to everything. There's always, even if you have certification, this trust foundation is the basis, because otherwise you cannot control everything. So that even when you have certification, this is a necessary element.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you for that answer. We are getting a number of questions coming in from our audience, and thank you very much to our audience for asking these questions. And please do place your questions in the questions tab. Our panelists are all online. So Gustavo, we have a couple of questions that we already had come in earlier, and we have a number of questions that come in. Shall we alternate that you ask a question and I take one of the questions out of the questions tab, or how shall we proceed?
Let me go back to the questions. You can maybe, Tonya, you can ask the questions and allocate them to the different panelists if you already see that they are already flagged. So you can go ahead.
Okay, perfect. There is one question that I think we can answer. I hope we can answer very quickly, and that is, why is Guatemalan cardamom not subjected to import testing? That's a bit of a different topic than we've discussed today, but hopefully we can give a quick answer to that.
Yeah, it's coming, I think, from my presentation. I actually don't know. We just source Guatemala cardamom because of the taste profile and the quality, preferred above Indian quality. But might be that it is not subjected for import control, but I don't have that information.
Okay. So unfortunately, Deepak, we don't know. But Gustavo?
Yeah, maybe it's also because no specific risks have been identified in that supply chain. And usually a lot of the products get tested more often if there are specific risks identified in that supply chain from a specific country. So maybe that's why there's no, consistent testing, because there have not been specific risks identified in that supply chain. Obviously, Guatemala is, together with India, as Bertrand mentioned, the big suppliers of cardamom to the European market.
Yeah. So they may also have more experience in terms of tackling fraud and adulteration at the production level.
Yeah, testing can be in many ways, of course, can also be pesticide residues and other risks that you have, other food safety risks. But my suggestion is that that's why it's not in a specific risk list in European authority. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that answer, Gustavo. I'm taking a next question. This question is coming in from Martin. Martin is asking about regenerative agriculture. He says it's often used nowadays. In the USA, organic regenerative is a separate certification scheme. And how do our panelists see this? Should a regenerative as a sustainability term be secured through a scheme that is linked to, for example, GAP Organic or other schemes? Who would like to take this?
Maybe I can comment, and then the private sector actors can actually answer more extensively. I think it's already an existing certification. It's third-party audited. Regenerative Organic Certified, I think it's called. There is an existing certification. The integration into Global GAP and maybe Organic EU, etc., I think it's something that will naturally come as a module within legislation or a module within existing certifications, but I think it's something that we'll see coming in the next years. As a separate certification, to my knowledge, it already exists. It can be third-party audited.
And do you mean that it exists as a separate certification, Gustavo, also in the EU or just in the US?
I do not believe it's incorporated into EU regulation, but it is a third-party audited private certification you can get, regenerative organic certified, it's called. So it already exists. It is a proposition that you can have to your company if you want to. I do not believe it's incorporated yet in European regulation, but maybe something we'll see in the next years.
Okay, thank you. And private sector representatives, anything to add to that? Do you have any experience with the certification, for example?
For me, no experience. What I do know is high complex and to implement. And we are looking to the big multinationals like Unilever and Nestle, what they're doing, and they develop checklists as a standard, and also to be trained and implemented in the supply chains. But for me, it's new or never occurred or like a certification scheme to be certified against too.
Okay, and Iona, I saw you nodding. Anything to add?
Yeah, so I think it would be interesting to read what should be the how you say the values of this certification, because I think indeed with regenerative agriculture it's such a broad term that I think it's very complex to implement, and you should really look at the it's really a step-by-step system that yeah, if you don't start supporting it from the very first moment, then it will be very difficult to implement. So I think it's also a bit of a danger to have this certification, because then it also creates a higher price for those who are already taken a lot of steps, which might stop others from starting this process. So I think it's of course an interesting discussion, but it also has some risks.
Okay, maybe that's an interesting segue to the next question that we have. Paul is asking, what are the sanctions when fraud is discovered by a supply chain partner and or the European Food Authority? Does the trading, the exporter immediately get banned, for example? Gustavo, maybe kick it off.
I think the first step that we see, if we go to the RASP portal, which is the portal that has the registration of all the food safety non-compliances, so to speak, you can see a lot of order rejections there. There are some notifications. Also, it depends on the gravity of the issue, but that, as we know, can lead in the long run to an origin being stigmatized and maybe being put in the list, and then you have more checks for that origin for specific spices. So that's exactly answering probably the previous question as to why some origins and some spices are checked. So these are the implications. First thing is that the product can be rejected at the border. The long-term consequences that a whole origin can be stigmatized.
And Alicia, do you have any experience with that?
Well, actually, we don't have so much experience, but what we were like, as we did a lot of research before we are like entering or like starting to deal with certain countries or like producers, but we didn't really experience any difficulties of fraud or adulteration. But what I think it would be good to have like a platform where like people can, you know, like put their issues, describe, and then like others can educate them. So and about punishment, it's only like a long term, you know, like a future might affect the traders, but honestly, I don't have a clear solution for now for this problem.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. And Evert-Jan, I think you said in your presentation that one of the responses that Verstegen uses is to simply avoid traders if you find that there is a problem with their delivery. Does that happen immediately, or do you give them a second chance?
There is always a second chance. There is always a second chance, of course. We start discussing, and we ask them to be transparent to showing the data, and if they are capable or willing to comply, then we still continue discussing. But if they are not capable or not willing, then yeah, at the end it will stop, of course.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that addition. And looking at the time, Iona, do you have a quick follow-up to what Alessa, Gustavo, and Evedian have said? I believe you're muted, Iona.
Yeah, so we haven't had that experience either, as we are closely working on now 5 origins. But yeah, what I can say so far is that, of course, we also have sometimes issues with quality, which is not, it's like on top of the requirements that are already there. And for us, it's just start discussing what's the problem, if the producer or the farmers are aware of the problem, and if they are willing to implement solutions that will upgrade the quality and on which terms. So then we continue working with them if the trust is there, that the problem will be solved.
It all comes down to trust eventually. Thank you, Iona. We have a couple of questions that have come in specifically for Evedian. One, Evedian, is a question of whether you can explain a bit more about the blockchain app. And the second question is, how does Verstegen check organic herbs for negative residues on the finished product or on fresh raw materials? And do you take into consideration the drying factor? Perhaps you can elaborate on both questions in your answer.
Yes, I think the organic question is quite easy. We just run them to on the received goods. Also, the sample, pre-shipment sample will be tested, but also the received goods will be tested, and that's also like a monitoring scheme, like how well do we know the supplier, and how often do we check the product supplied. And I think the dehydration factor only complies to conventional product, because there is a certain residual level, and organic, it's always 0. So there is doesn't really matter if it's fresh or dehydrated. It should not be there, right? Otherwise it's not organic produced. There are some guidelines also, I think, from Germany, that might be one residue can be there as a contaminated risk, but are there several, then it is not considered as organic. But yeah, basically the dehydration factor is not an issue in organic production. And the first question was about the blockchain. Well, yeah, it can be a very long answer, or
very short, please.
Yeah, we developed an app, and this app is installed with our collectors, and those collectors are doing the daily transactions with our farmers. We have been mapping the farmers in those collector areas, and either we are going to, the collector is going to the farmer to buy the products, or the farmer is coming to the collector to do the transaction. As said, they have the card and the farmer, and they share the data, the demographic data of the farmer, so the location, the name, etc. So they tap on the app, and then the transaction will be entered in the app with the farm gate price, what is the price for that quality, and we are then paying premiums for a certain quality, but also towards the farmer, that they are willing to share the data with us. So that is rewarded with an extra, monetized with an extra premium on top of the market price. And then we enter that information to the app, and the farmer can then approve that by tapping with the card again on the app, and that will be then stored in the blockchain. And the benefit from the farmer will be that he has his transaction records over a certain period of time, which he also can use if he is willing to apply for a microcredit, that he has shown evidence of how much business he is having with his spice trade to the micro lender, and that they have some data to show, and that the micro lender has some proof that the farmer has a real business and can give them or show them some credits.
Yeah, so a combination of trust and checks, as it were.
Yeah.
And suppose someone were interested not only in knowing how it works, but also interested in introducing a blockchain traceability solution in their own supply chain. Would there be a way for them to reach out to Verstegen or to you, for example, to get some additional information?
Of course, yes.
Okay,
always willing to discuss and to explain.
Perfect. So I think we will share the link to the website with general contact information for Stay in that in the follow-up email that we do after this presentation, if that's okay with you, Evjan?
Well, maybe more my email address will be more easier.
Perfect.
With a big company. I'm not sure if they can address these questions to the right person then. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you for that. We'll add it. I'm going to take, I think, one final question, and there's a very interesting question that has come in from Kosala. And the question is very specifically focused on pepper and clove, but I think the question that is being asked is actually a question that has a much bigger significance for small farmers and small producers in general. And Kosala says the European buyers are kept hidden from us, as it were, by the middlemen, and our produce may likely be adulterated in the supply chain. So how can we, small-scale farmers, be put in touch directly with the ultimate buyers? And Iona and Alessa, I think that is something that the both of you have a lot of experience with. So I'd like to invite you to respond very quickly. How do you think, what recommendations do you have for producers, small-scale producers? And Evjan and Gustavo, I'd like you to wrap it up when the both of them are done. Iona?
Yes, I think it's important to have clearly as a producer or farmer what your goals are and what you want to achieve, so what your interests are, and find a buyer that shares them, because then you can work together in this process. Of course, the problem is finding each other. I do believe that just sharing a lot of emailing, just creating a network, but also social media can help you get in touch directly with buyers in Europe. So take these actions yourself, maybe set up a website so that you're visible, that you're findable, and search yourself. I think Instagram is a good place for high-end
buyers to find. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Iona. Alessa?
As I already said in my speech, that probably it makes sense to find those organizations or like join up to the cooperatives, and at least like launch the information and your presence in the market. So like buyers and like us, importers can at least find, it would be much easier to find them. And because we gather first of all, we go to the site and to research, and but we need also information from already organized bodies that know like where the product is growing and who are the farmers, and so like we cannot go directly and find the farms, so we should deal through some bodies that can
yeah, so like industry associations, for example, yeah. or chambers of commerce, etc. And Gustavo, I'll get to you in a second. I already see you nodding. Evjan, anything to add very briefly?
Well, to be of interest for companies in Europe or in the West is being transparent and having supply chain data right on farmers. If whatever information you can already collect as a local or origin country or organization in the country, that will be very helpful supporting in developing those supply chains.
Okay, thank you. And Gustavo, I believe that this question is also one that is tackled in your market information and market analysis studies, right? Getting in touch with buyers in Europe, in the West.
Exactly. There are some tools that are published on CBI website already, and Thomas will show us these tools. But I just wanted maybe to conclude, I think it's linked to what everyone is saying, is that start implementing, start doing things that actually make sense for your supply chain. I have just come back from a trade fair. They were discussing the EU Green Deal, due diligence, and everyone is looking for a solution from above. But I do feel it's a bottom-up thing, like what makes sense in your supply chain, what makes sense in terms of information, practices, that can cover the risks that you have identified as suppliers, but also as buyers. You know, everyone is looking for answers, but the instruments are already there. It's about recognizing what the risks are and covering those risks. I think this is the implication of what is coming up in terms of regulation. And yeah, do not wait. I think that's kind of like the call for action that I would like to communicate here.
And I think that's a very great call for action with which we can terminate the presentations part of this webinar and almost close the webinar as well. And Gustavo, you have been so kind as to invite our speakers today. So I'm just going to say thank you to our speakers and then hand over to you, Gustavo, to thank them more effectively than I could possibly do. But I found it extremely interesting to hear the various perspectives from the private sector as to how you tackle fraud and adulteration within your supply chain. But more than that, I've been really inspired to hear how, as Gustavo said, you've taken this bottom-up approach to find what really works for you, what applies in your company, and to do that in line with the values and the norms and the vision and mission that you have as your individual companies, whether you're a very small company, whether you've just started your company, or whether you're a much bigger buyer, like, for example, First Station. So I found that very inspirational. I really want to thank you for being a part of this webinar. And as I said, Gustavo is the person who invited you, so I'm going to give him a chance to thank you for being here as well.
Yeah, no, Tona, thanks for summarizing. This is exactly the point, bringing in companies from different sizes, different philosophies, different products, different locations, different difficulties. And I'm so happy that you guys actually agreed to join, because I think we have reached the objectives, which is to bring a perspective to the issue and practice, good practices, and also your solutions regarding this issue. Not talking forever about the problem, but also bringing solutions. And you guys have, you know, like brought this perspective. So thank you, Yona. Thank you, Everchan. Thank you, Alessia. I'm saying order that I can see here on my screen. No specific order. I appreciate your presence here. And also of the audience, I have seen questions coming up. We are trying to answer all questions. They are gonna come to us later. I'm gonna try to address them. I see Rosita asked some questions, Martin, and I see other people asking specific questions. So there is follow-up, but I also wanted to say, you see, when you bring in the subject and you start the discussion, there's just so much interest. I see people sending messages about collaboration and wanting to learn about the tools that are already used. So Alessia, your idea about a platform is not a bad idea. So just wanted to throw this out there. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Tony, for moderating. And thank you, CBI, for all your support, technical support and content support also.
And thank you, Gustavo, for being... Sorry,
sorry to interrupt, but I completely agree with the marketplace. So maybe we should start that.
I think I see the beginnings of a very beautiful partnership right here on the screen. Great to hear that. And thank you to Gustavo. I did not leave you out, but kept the best for the last, I think I would say, for your enthusiasm and your in-depth knowledge of the spices and herbs sector and how you've been able to share that with us today, but also how you're sharing that in the news articles that are on the CBI website and in the market studies, the market analysis and market entry studies that are on the website. I think they're going to be extremely useful for our audience. And I am now going to switch over back to CBI and invite Thomas to share with us where exactly to find that information. Once again, to our panel, thank you so much for being here, and hopefully see you next time in a webinar about spices and herbs. And thank you. Thomas.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tonia. You have my last slide. Yes, thank you. So as I was telling in the beginning, CBI has two main pillars, the CBI projects and of course our market information. So on our website, we make market information available for small and medium enterprises in developing countries and also all other people interested. There are target group for these studies are small and medium enterprises in developing countries. I'm going to show you now. We go to the website, and there I will show you what you can find on our website. So here you see our website, and so you can go to the projects. I taught you earlier. You can find all kind of projects in the sector that are currently active. And of course, I'm here mainly now to tell you where you can find studies on spices and herbs. You go to our market information page and to the spices and herbs. So you see market information / spices and herbs. And we have all kinds of studies here. We have sector studies about the demand in Europe and what's the demand for spices in Europe. You see the main products and the main countries in Europe. All the statistics. We offer a study on trends. We have tip studies on how to find buyers. We do not give you a list of potential buyers, but we give you all kinds of tips to make your own list and find the buyers that fit to your company. And then we have all kinds of product studies like cardamom, cinnamon. You see them here all. So yeah, we invite you to go to our website and look at some of the studies. Let me just click on curcuma. Then you will see that we have on curcuma, we have a market potential study. That's again, what are the current imports to Europe? What are the main countries? And we have the market entry study, which tells you all about the specific requirements and also the channels and the competition you face. So please, let me close here and just invite you to go to our website and look for more information.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And for our viewers, just to wrap up the presentation and our webinar today, and I'm checking to see whether you can see my slide. Yes, you can indeed. Just to wrap it up today, thank you again once more for being here today. We are a little late, but we really appreciate you staying with us. And just to wrap up the webinar, we have recorded this session, so we're going to be sending you an email with a link to the presentation so that you can watch it. The information about spices and herbs is on the CBI website, and as Gustavo already said, the questions that we did not get around to answering in our Q&A panel, we will follow up with you about them. We're also going to be sharing the contact information for Jan Verstegen for those of you that are interested in the blockchain app. And just before you sign out, you are going to see an evaluation form. We'd very much appreciate it if you took 1 minute to fill it out. If you think this webinar was useful to you, give us a 10 if you thought it was fantastic. Give us a 1 if you thought it was really horrible, but please do fill it out. We really appreciate that. Thank you again for being here. Thank you again to Thomas. Thank you again to the team at CBI behind the screens that have also been answering questions. And I look forward to seeing you at another webinar. Have a wonderful day and goodbye.
Thank you all.